Everyone. I'm very pleased to introduce to you our panelists today. First, we have Mujdat Cetin. Mujdat is the director of the Goergen Institute for Data Science and the New York State Center of Excellence in Data Science at the University of Rochester, where he is a professor of electrical and computer engineering. He also directs the NSF-sponsored PhD training program on AR and VR at Rochester and is the current editor-in-chief of the IEEE Transactions on Computational Imaging, a senior area editor for the IEEE Transactions on Image Processing, and an associate editor for the SIAM Journal on Image Sciences and for Data Sciences and Science. Mujdat is also a fellow of IEEE, and his research interests are within the broad area of data, signal, and imaging sciences, with cross-disciplinary links to several other areas of electrical engineering, computer science, and neuroscience. So welcome, Mujdat. Next, we have Doug Hague. Doug is the founding executive director for the School of Data Science at UNC Charlotte, that's University of North Carolina, Charlotte. He comes with deep industry experience in financial services, telecommunications, and aerospace, and is currently a member of the State of North Carolina's Innovation Council, a regulatory sandbox. Doug's research interests are split between sports analytics and methods for managing the bias and fairness of data science models. Prior to joining the university, Doug was Chief Analytics Officer for Bank of America's Merchant Services. He also chaired UNC Charlotte's Industry Advisory Board for the Data Science Initiative. Doug earned a bachelor's degree in engineering physics from the University of Tulsa, a master's degree in system design and management from MIT, and a master's degree and PhD in materials science and engineering from Penn State University. Welcome, Doug. Next, we would have had Noreen Kemp, and sadly she has had to decline because she's in the ER right now. Well, urgent care. She's okay, but she's tweaked her back, and so she will not be able to join us today, unfortunately. Noreen is the Dean of the College of Computers and Information Technology at St. Petersburg College. I know that she welcomes folks to reach out to her, so if you have questions that are specific to smaller and two-year colleges, she might be able to answer those by email. And you can reach out to Stella or I for contact information. And finally, we have Brian Wright. Brian is the Director of Undergraduate Programs at the University of Virginia School of Data Science, where he is an Associate Professor of Data Science. Brian is also the director for the school's first collaboratory within the UVA School of Education, which launched in 2019 with research hubs on economic mobility, replication studies, and education technology implementation. Prior to joining UVA in 2019, Brian developed the Master's of Data Science program at George Washington University, where he taught for 4 years. While at GW, he founded their Data Science Institute and helped develop the creation of a joint PhD in education and data science. Brian began his career with the Department of Defense as a management consultant and researcher with a focus on enterprise resource planning conversion. Finally, Brian holds degrees from the University of Tennessee, including PhD in higher education administration, and MPA in public administration, a BS in economics. So welcome, Brian. And I think the first thing I can take from all these bios is that all of you have quite the winding path and diverse backgrounds. So I hope that gives hope to many of us who have similar backgrounds and hope to join the data science community. So let's begin. Very easy. I would love for each of you I gave you more formal introductions, but maybe you could just take a moment to briefly introduce yourselves to our audience, more from the perspective of your current role, how long you've been in that role, and more specifically, what you do in your current role as it relates to being on hiring committees or your role involved in hiring, if that makes sense. And we will just continue for now in alphabetical order. So Mujdat, would you like to take that one first, please?
Sure, I'm happy to. Thanks for the invitation, Stella and Micaela. It's a pleasure to be here. So I've been at Rochester as a faculty member for 6 years. I have been directing the Goergen Institute for Data Science, or GIDS in short, for 3 years. So I can tell you a bit more about GIDS later, but basically it's an interdisciplinary institute with a campus-wide mission spanning research, learning, community outreach, and economic impact. And we have faculty positions, both affiliated and joint positions. Again, I can tell you about the details of those later. But in terms of my involvement in search committees as the institute director, I'm pretty much involved in all steps and all aspects. And I can tell you what those are. Again, we can get into details later. That starts with First of all, getting a position created and a search approved by the university administration. Sometimes the university administration creates slots for us. Sometimes we have to ask for slots and justify them. And then once a slot is approved, we have to determine the priority areas, whether we'll have a broad search versus focused search. Here, I'm mostly focusing on tenure track, full-time positions, of course. And that determination of the priority areas involves a discussion among faculty, especially the research area leaders in our institute. That can be driven by what we are missing, or that can be mostly related to areas in which we want to build strength specifically. So once we determine the priority area, then we put together a search committee. Usually the committee is, of course, matched to the search. It can be broad, it can be focused. And they usually come from faculty affiliated with our institute. And those faculty are, of course, have home departments from all around the university. That committee gets approved by the school deans. And then we have some training for the committees that includes diversity, implicit bias training, guidelines for a fair and effective search. And then we prepare a job description, decide on a hiring timeline, advertise the position. We review applications. The committee meets during that process, creates a short list of candidates. We have Zoom interviews, short, like 30-minute Zoom interviews with shortlisted candidates, after which we determine whom to invite for on-campus interviews. We have the on-campus interviews and job offers. So that's pretty much what we go through. I'm happy to get into details later.
Great, thank you so much. Next, why don't we take Doug? Can you briefly introduce your hiring role and maybe a little bit about the process, since Mujdat jumped in?
Sure, yeah, Mujdat got a lot of it there, so I won't repeat what he does because we do very similar things. But so I serve on several different, so the School of Data Science is an interdisciplinary 6-college collaboration across the campus. I have 89 faculty now and 28 different departments. So we have the joint affiliate, and we do have a few non-tenure track permanent faculty wholly within the school. So one of the questions I think that as I get to the recommendations is know where your home is going to be as you're interviewing. It's very important. The roles I play everything from a committee member. Usually I tried not to be the chair of the committee because that's the most work. But I also have 2 other roles. So if the home is within my school, then I have the deciding role. And so the committees will make recommendations, and then I basically decide which offer to start with first, and second, third, if that's necessary. Other times I have an influential role. So if the home is in a different department, then the deans of the colleges will have the deciding role, and I will help, provide feedback and influence to those deans on which one I think would be the best, kind of affiliate or joint faculty with the school. So different roles at different times on different positions. But that's kind of part of being a interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary unit where you've got different types of faculty.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I'm probably going to loop back to that, but let's let Brian introduce himself and his role, and then I have some follow-up questions.
Okay, hello. So yeah, and listening to that, I have like post-traumatic stress from all the hiring. So like our school, we've been, as the UVA, we're a standalone school. And over the last 2 to 3 years, I think one of the major deliverables that we've been doing as a school is hiring. So we've hired 15 faculty a year for 3 years. It's been crazy. So I've served, in a variety of roles, and as including chair of a hiring committee, even when I was still an assistant professor, just because of the capacity that the school had. So we have 2 main tracks, really 3, I guess, main tracks. We have a lot of centrally funded UVA initiatives that overlap with data science. So we bring faculty in on those, which the creation of those positions is driven a lot of the provost office. And then we have 2 classes of faculty inside the school. So we have general faculty, and then we have tenure track faculty. They're equivalent in terms of opportunities and salary and promotion and all those things, except that the general faculty teach basically 2 more classes a year, you know, than the tenured faculty. Tenured faculty can buy out down lower. So, yeah, so my role has been, you know, over the last 4 years, pretty either running those committees or serving on those committees, and then a lot of recruiting too. So we really try and reach out to our networks as much as possible to get a diverse group of candidates in, which I think is the hardest part by far, just given all the competition that's out there. So that's what I spend a lot of time doing, is trying to attract good candidates into the school so we can get them in front of the faculty. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Brian. And
Sure.
on that note, I do want to also mention that the career guidebook that Stella mentioned, even though it's primarily targeted at hiring non-faculty, so staff, data scientists, and research software engineers in academia, there is certainly a lot of overlap with some of the hiring and retention and promotion challenges I imagine all of you face, including quite extensive suggestions for how to increase diversity. So I would encourage you all to have a look at that chapter. So looping back around to something that all of you a little bit touched on was these ideas of how these positions are created, whether they're fully within your institution or school or your purview, I guess your power purview, or if they're joint, or if they're coming in from a university-wide initiative. I imagine that the funding for those positions then also varies, or how those positions are being funded. So I guess I want to throw back out there to all of you. Can you speak a little bit about that funding, how stable it is depending on where it's coming from, whether or not this is something that somebody who's applying to one of your positions should really look hard at? Where's this funding coming from? How long is this line going to be around, this faculty line going to be around? What is the stability of that funding? And then also maybe touch on, are there often usually startup packages involved in these offers? So does somebody want to volunteer to go first, or should I? Oh, Mujdat, go for it.
I mean, before getting into the funding issue, first, perhaps we can kind of outline these types of positions as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
and there could be,
That'd
so
be great.
basically, I guess, I mean, there could be different types of data science faculty positions. First of all, there could be positions in traditional home departments. This could be a CS department, an electrical engineering department, a biology or political science department, but the search may involve some focus on data science. So that could be your traditional position, but there's a focus on data science. Secondly, there could be cluster hires in data science. I think that's the type of thing perhaps that Brian was describing. This usually involves an interdepartmental search committee, and the hired faculty member is usually appointed to a home department, and they may have some kind of affiliation with a data science entity, unless that's a data science school, which I'll get to next. And then a data science institute, center, or school may be conducting the search, but the search, again, might involve just a soft affiliation with that entity, but the full appointment could be in a home department. So that's kind of the third type. And then a data science entity could be doing a search with a joint hire objective, which would be 50% in the data science entity, whether it's an institute or center or department, and 50% in a home department. And the tenure process may vary depending on the institution in that case. And finally, there could be a search for a full-time appointment in a data science entity. And again, some of the schools of data science are now doing that. I think it's important for candidates to understand the type of the position and the implications, the requirements, the responsibilities. So in terms of the types of searches we have here, in the past, most of our data science searches have been broad interdisciplinary search committees with then appointments in home departments. But I think that was in the process of building our institute. Now that we are pretty well established, most of our current searches are managed by the Data Science Institute, and they are joint positions. So depending on the year, we may have a joint position with computer science, with political science, or we may have a broad data science position with a joint hire with a home department, where the home department would be determined based on the background and interests of the hired faculty member. In terms of funding for our institution, I guess all of this is, planned and approved by the provost's office. So in terms of stability of funding, it wouldn't make a difference. These are all tenure line positions, so they would be as stable as any other position at the university.
Our startup, I mean, just speaking purely of funding now, our startup packages something that are offered typically, and should that be expected?
Yes,
Okay.
startup packages are typically offered. The amount and level that usually depends on the needs of the faculty. In fact, after we decide to make someone an offer, before sending out the offer, we ask the faculty member, what do you need to be successful for the first 3-4 years without getting to the stage of getting stable external support? And they tell us what they need, and then we figure out if we can provide that.
Yeah, good tip for those applying for jobs. Have that number in your head and be able to justify it. Doug.
Yeah, I was going to say, let me start there, because there's other things other than just money to ask for. And so it can be course releases for a certain number of years. It can be PhD students that are funded through the department or through the university. So understand that, yeah, you may need some equipment, you may need HPC type, certain amount of capacity from the HPC or whatever, but you can also ask for students. You can also ask for course releases for a set period of time. Now, you are going to roll up and to eventually whatever the workload is for the position, but you can ask for that kind of thing up front. And sometimes that's easier for departments to agree to than just raw money. And so just realize and ask what the constraints are and where it may be easier, because you may be able to make some trades on that. So our funding is much like Mujdat, and I know it's different than UVA's. We are centrally funded through the provost office. So right now I'm in the process of waiting for our North Carolina legislature to say whether they're going to provide a block group of funding for data science. Hopefully they will, and then I will have a large cluster hire that is run through the school. Fingers crossed. It was supposed to be done July 1st, but our legislature takes their time deciding that. And so sometimes it comes straight from the legislature, sometimes it comes from the provost office. A lot of our positions are what we call, returns from the departments. And so a lot of times when I'm working with department chairs, they'll have an opening, but they want a data science related position now, because number one, it's easier for the provost to give that one back than it is potentially a full position to the department that came, as they're managing the capacity across the university. So that's where it's important to ask, not necessarily where the funding's coming from, but, what is my relationship? Where's my home? And it's not always 50-50 for joint hires for us. It can be anywhere from 75 one way to 30% the other. And so it can really vary, and knowing that up front is important, and you should ask. And if you are interested in being part of the committees or being part of the schools or initiatives or institutes, you need to ask for that, because a lot of times when the departments themselves are actually running the searches, and maybe I have one member from the school on there, they're going to try and say you should be fully within the school or fully within their department. And maybe you'll affiliate, maybe you won't. But if you really want to have your career in data science, you should be asking, well, I can affiliate, can I be a joint faculty, depending upon what you want. And you can move that percentage based on your desires.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I do want to flag that you mentioned the legislature, and so many of us who've been or are in state schools are beholden a little bit to the local government. So also something to keep in mind. Brian, did you want to chime in on where the home is for these positions and how that relates to funding and startup?
Yeah, so we have a standalone school, and we were lucky enough to have a pretty large donation to be able to start that. And so we have the regular revenue streams that any other school would have relative to tuition and research, paybacks, things like that. But we do have a good bit of startup. So we're able to hire people fully into the school, which allowed us to scale up pretty quickly. We started out doing a lot of joint appointments, and I think it's a healthy way to develop kind of an interdisciplinary community. But over time, we started to be a little bit more selfish relative to where we were asking people to be fully housed. The complexity of having to deal with many joint appointments across a school is, to a certain scale, intractable. So we started to shift towards recommending and biasing candidates that wanted to be 100% data science, if I'm being totally honest.
Yeah,
so
I think that's a trend, Brian. Just to jump in on that and double down, I think that's a trend in my school. We're working towards where Brian is today, but there's a lot of discussion. And as we talk across the country, that wholly within the school enables a lot easier management than a lot of these joint appointments. But joint appointments are great. I mean, that's where you start and that's where you're going through them. But sorry, Brian, I interrupted you.
No, it's great. It just reaffirms my point. That's good. And so I think like we said, we have a tendency to do a lot of Zoom screens, and we kind of get a sense of whether someone is interested about committing to the field, or if they're just moonlighting in data science to be able to get a position in another space on campus. So we filter on that a little bit. So, just keep that in mind. If you come into this initial screen and you're like, what's the percentage going to be in computer science, like right out of the gate, really, oh. So I think it's important for the field as well, as we grow and establish about what the norms, even the body of knowledge and practice is of data science, that we have full faculty members in the school that are data scientists, and move that field forward. So yeah, I'll stop. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And Stella, I'll get to you in a second here. I just wanted to offer the opportunity, because we kind of pivoted a little bit towards distribution of faculty that are either joint appointments or affiliated versus all in on the data science. And so I'm curious, what is that? Doug, you mentioned that's the trend. It sounds like Brian agrees. Mujdat, do you agree? Is the trend towards, fewer of these joint and affiliated hires and people becoming more fully faculty of data science? And maybe you could even, if you have some numbers, how many faculty do you have in your department, and are they all data science, the ones that are full on data science, or are they all joint?
I think each institution is at a different stage in this, and then each institution has kind of a different vision. And we have, I think, the number of the types of data science initiatives is probably at the same order of the number of institutions which offer such initiatives. So there is a lot of variety. There could be some convergence in the long term where we collectively figure out the right model, perhaps. But in our case, we don't have a school of data science. So our vision is that rather than creating a school that will compete with other schools, we have this interdisciplinary institute that cuts across, especially in research. Although in education, we award our own degrees, we feel that this is a model that facilitates collaborations better. So because of that, our starting point was actually just soft affiliations, not even a formal appointment, because the Data Science Institute was very new. But again, as I was pointing, now we are in a pretty stable situation, and we now have these joint positions, and we are benefiting from them. But I agree with Doug and Brian that they are much more complicated to manage. At this point in our institute, we have 90 plus affiliated faculty, and we have just started joint appointments last year. We have 3 joint faculty candidates at this point. They are there with computer science, but this year we have a joint faculty position in computational social science, and this will be joint between data science and one of 3 possible home departments: economics, political science, or linguistics. So that's predefined, but we have a search that attracts candidates from all these different. So again, it is a bit more complicated. I have to work with all the department chairs, have to figure out all the details, different salary ranges, and different cultures of these different disciplines. But that also makes it exciting. But I agree, it's more difficult to manage. And I don't know where we will converge, but that's where we are right now.
Yeah,
maybe I can
fully appreciate that. Go ahead. Sorry, Doug.
No, sorry, Micaela. Just real quick, I have 4 full-time faculty within the school. I have 18 joint faculty now. And then I have whatever that adds up to 89, 70 some affiliate faculty. The discussion is, in the long term, will we have maybe 25 to 33 or 40% full-time faculty, then some joint, and then affiliates? And our numbers will probably get larger because of the affiliation process, but we'll probably have, somewhere 25, 30, 40 kind of either wholly or joint within, and that will run the school. So it depends upon your academic structure, as Mujdat was saying.
Right, right. So we do have an audience question on joint appointments, but Stella, did you want to jump in with yours?
Sure. I just wanted to kind of dive into a little bit more on something you said, Brian. I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about how you screen candidates in terms of trying to determine whether or not they may be just moonlighting instead of dedicated to actually advancing the field of data science. So if I were a candidate, how could I signal to you very clearly that that's not what I'm doing? I am trying to advance the field.
Yeah, that might have been a little bit harsh there, but I mean, I think some of that is associated with, I mean, it probably varies depending on the candidate, but we often get people that come and interview that actually don't know much about our school. They know that it exists, and sometimes they know it's a school, but sometimes they don't. They know that it's the field of data science, and then they would know much more about the department with which potentially they're trying to affiliate. So that's kind of a red flag there for us to say, well, it's pretty easy to go on a website and just take a look, So, I mean, and not just that bar's pretty low, but you'd be surprised how often that happens. I also think like we have a tendency to hire people that are really interested in problems. I mean, to be honest, it's a very applied field. And if people come with problems that are clearly applicable to data science methods or techniques, then the dialogue between us and them usually goes really well. In other affiliate fields, and I'm not saying that that's not the case in statistics or computer science or things like this, but it seems like if they're more theory driven in terms of like pushing the edge in those fields, it's not that that's a bad thing. We just feel like it's potentially they could fit better in a more traditional stat or CS environment. And so that's kind of another screener. And it might be that they're just not representing themselves in a way that that is fully data science, but we have a tendency to be biased against that a bit, and it's for everybody's benefit, I will say. And so it's hard to put, Doug keeps agreeing, it's great. I guess I'm saying good things. So like, I think it's hard to put a finger on exactly what that looks like, but having done, I mean, literally maybe 100 screens or more, you start to get in a cadence and understand really what people are trying to tell you, even if they don't know. So I think there's some of that. And so, I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I see your hand, Torbit. Before I jump to you, I just wanted to flag something you said, Brian, which has come up in previous career panels and feels like it should not have to be said, but I'm glad that you brought it up, which is do the research of where you're applying, even if it's not a faculty position, wherever you're applying, do the research of the company or the place that you're applying and recognize that interviews are as much for you to get information as for them. So
I will say it is surprising how quickly you can whittle the pool down based off really simple criteria. People call it a data science institute. Well, it hasn't been an institute in about 4 years. So, I mean, it's not anywhere on the website. I don't know why you would say that. I mean, so there's certain things there that appear to be pretty low bar stuff, but it makes a difference. Yeah.
Okay, so Torbit, you have your hand raised. Do you want to jump in?
And I can ask at the end too. It's just a little bit hard to articulate a question in the chat. I think Brian's response helps clarify Stella's question for me. And I think a big question is, what is a data scientist? And I know at the Leadership Summit, there's talks on the organizations of data science institutes, what the hiring is going to be. So it's a continuing conversation. If your definition is that a data scientist is just a stats or CS terminal degree person, that's one definition. If your definition is it's a person who uses, computational methods to apply to a problem in a specific domain, and they may publish in those domain-specific journals using data science methods, that's a different interpretation. So I think that problem focus could be an emphasis in helping to define what data science is. But there's that national discussion, and different institutes are going to have different definitions, different departments. And so I think, I know ADSA is taking a leadership role on that part of the discussion. So it's an opaque field because of topics like that.
Yeah, so maybe I'll jump in on that, because I think we lean towards the second kind of person that has a problem. And really what we're most interested in is when your problems are not just within a single domain. And so if your curiosity and where you're actually focused on will cross domains, but we're using the statistics and the computer science as tools to solve problems, but your problem may not fit uniquely in one domain, that's what we look for the most, because those are the best researchers and best collaborators that we have found for data science in our faculty here. And it's really about curiosity and not being bound by field definitions of a particular field.
Maybe I'll add a few more points. Of course, the definitions will keep changing, and then you can define this at different levels. I guess at the undergraduate level, we have this working definition. I suppose someone interested has strong background in statistics, has algorithmic thinking, machine learning expertise, etc., but also is interested in some application domain with appreciation of expertise in that domain. I think that kind of defines an undergraduate data science major. Now, the other question at the research level is the related to this is the questions, what is a data science scientific contribution? And I think it's better to have a broad perspective there. In the sense that a data science scientific contribution could be at the foundations of data science, a data science algorithm, limitations of data science, fairness, that could be applicable all around the spectrum. It could be a use-inspired algorithmic contribution that you are interested in computer vision, but coming up with a technique that's new and that could be applied to other computer vision problems as well. And then thirdly, in fact, using data-driven methods for scientific pattern discovery or computational social science problems. To me, that's also a data science contribution. Accordingly, I think faculty positions could be attracting candidates all around the spectrum. Specific faculty positions could list specific PhD degrees, such as in our current open position, we list, I think, maybe 7, 8 different potential PhD degrees, all the way from computer science, data science, operations research, applied math, statistics, economics, linguistics, political science, or related fields. So many institutions, I think, are being as broad as possible to attract the best candidates.
Yeah, and we just to jump into, we have this kind of we have a definitional concept of what data science is, and it has these 4 areas. Without getting into those, we also, recently we've hired, philosophers that specialize in data ethics and policy. We have some people that are much more clearly engineers that focus in like applications of cloud computing at the edge, that don't necessarily do as much machine learning. And then, of course, we have the analytics people. And then we're really searching the people that seem to be hardest to find are people that really specialize in data communications and kind of visualization. It's not traditional path in terms of research, but an important aspect of the larger picture. So usually what ends up happening is that we have people from diverse backgrounds that kind of specialize in that type of thing. Human-centered design and ends up being a target of people we like to bring in that space. And so when you think about it, that's how so instead of, and I think the background saying, hey, these are the PhDs that might be considered, the way that we go about it is kind of a discussion of those domains, and then say, hey, do you feel comfortable inside those domains or cutting across them? And if so, we'd welcome people to apply.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you're all conveying the fact that data science can be applied to so many different fields, and even what Doug said, where it's most powerful when it can cross different fields and bring different fields together. So you actually don't feel like you fit in any real home department, right? Because you're actually being the ultimate interdisciplinary researcher, and how you would advertise for a position like that versus one where you realize, we really want to lean into our university's strength in political science or some other domain, and then decide that that's the flavor of data scientists. So I think we've mostly answered, we had an audience question about this, essentially what qualifies as a data science position when it could be any kind of terminal degree. And I think we've mostly covered that. So I want to move on instead to, because I want to be cognizant of time and give the audience a chance here too, but I want to touch on this idea of how a candidate could stand out. And that's from the very first application. They have their CV submitted, right? You haven't talked to them. There's no interview yet. What are some of the things that kind of jump out when you're doing that first initial screening in an application? And I'm going to add my own twist to this, because I'm very curious to hear what you all have to say about reconciling traditional metrics for academia, which means often first author publications, with the real work of a data scientist, or in fact a research software engineer. That could be about coding and workflows, and these don't often end up, especially in high-end journals, but whose impact can be measured, right, in other ways, for example, through GitHub. So yeah, if you could speak a little bit to what are you looking for on paper in that first blush, that first pass through the applicant pool, and how do you reconcile with formally traditional metrics? And if you want to talk about how that complication is also embedded in joint hires, go for it. Who wants to go first on this?
I can go first. And so as we're blushing through, I mean, a lot of it depends upon where the home is. So I'm going to come back to that. So if it's a home and your tenure home is going to get measured by that home and they want books, right? Then you're going to have to publish books, whether you're a joint with data science or not. One of the clear things that I'm seeing is when your home is within data science, the recognition of those other are often written into the tenure policies and tenure guidelines that we have. And so a lot of times, now some of those are in CS as well, but there are very few fields that don't necessarily have fairly rigid, yeah, you got to be in these, not only do you have to publish, but you have to be in these 5 journals, right? To be able to really count. And that's not necessarily where I think data science needs to go. But as we're screening through it, I look at publications, where they're publishing. Let's look at whether they're participating in research grant approvals. And I also look at the breadth. And so are you using one particular method? Or are you using multiple methods and research techniques to actually solve problems? And so the curiosity of not just being one thing, it's hard when you're doing your PhD, but maybe having a couple different things that you've spread your techniques around is something that I'll look for in the first blush, just to get through the first cut. You know, their statements of research are often the areas where you, sorry, Brian, the statements of research are the places where you can say, I'm interested in the following that are not necessarily reflected in your current publications. And that's I read those very carefully.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time on the research statements too. I think those sometimes are almost more or as important as any other documents that get loaded up. We talk a lot about potential, you know, like what is the current acceleration associated with productivity and, you know, interdisciplinary partnerships, things like that. You know, some people just take a little bit longer. So it's then like, you know, what have they done? Not to bias towards recent activity, but we kind of look at that like a trajectory a little bit. And then I also think, you know, sometimes you can read these, again, having read so many of them so frequently, like these research statements, it does come across as people start to put in buzzwords that they think you want to hear, and don't do that. All right. So every resume I read, or read everyone, but a lot of the research statements I read last year said, I am interested in explainable AI and ethics and justice, but none of their research and publications prove that you have done any of that. So like if the research statement conflicts with your productivity, that's a huge red flag, because it looks like you're just throwing stuff in there to trying to appease the panel. So don't do that. I know this is about what we screen, but that's what we screen for. I mean, it comes across pretty obviously, especially in that area. It's just disingenuous. So for those types of things, I'd be a little cautious about that. But to echo Doug's comments, I mean, we made offers to people in philosophy that hadn't published a single thing. And it was based off their research area and like what the general expectations are for that department. And then there's other people that come from more traditional departments, which are, you know, don't have jobs yet, but have publications in the 20s, you know, so the variance between them is just dramatic. And so we have a nice balance, I think, on the committee, and we had to do it purposely, of people that come from more traditional kind of STEM backgrounds, and then social scientists, and then, you know, liberal arts professors even, right, you know, to keep degree. So we can have, so we ask to say, hey, what is the expectation in this field? And then try and bring that into the discussion about any one particular client, candidate. So I think that's where we're at. We spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, future productivity, like what is the potential of this, and then kind of look for red flags about what they say connecting to what they've done. I think that's a big one.
Yeah, I'll just add a few words in support of all of this. So essentially, the faculty hiring and search and hiring process is a complex data science problem itself, right? It's a predictive analytics problem with limited observations. There's big data, there's a data mining problems in there. So essentially what we are discussing are the features, right? So you want to extract features, and you want those features to be informative about the actual thing that you are interested in, which is long-term benefit to the institution, broadly to science, and broadly to society. That's what we are trying to predict. And how we try to do that prediction partially depends on the institution. It depends on the position. For some positions, it could be really heavily dependent on publications. If you are looking for someone doing optimization for machine learning, you want to looking for these mathematically oriented publications. Whereas if you are interested in someone with some social science applications or use of data science in society, then you are looking for social impact, work with community organizations. So it all depends on the nature of the search. I guess we can get to kind of advice for the candidates as well, but since Brian already brought this up, I think being genuine and being consistent is important. So we really want to see that. After all, we are looking for a colleague who we want to work with in the long term. So that is important. The other thing that is perhaps important is, so again, it's a big data mining problem. So please highlight aspects of your background and interests that are very well aligned with the position and with the institution. So that doesn't mean that we don't expect you to change yourself necessarily. We don't want you to pretend as a different person. We understand you are applying to many positions. So it's fine to have the same research statement perhaps, but write a good cover letter highlighting what we should focus on. That will really make the process more optimal for everyone. So that will help us avoid wrong decisions on the part of the institutions and also on the part of the candidates.
Excellent. Thank you, Mujdat. So since we are pivoting to advice for potential candidates, I was wondering now, moving on in the sort of virtual hiring process, what about interviews? So once a candidate gets past that first stage and you've invited them for an interview, are there any things in your experience that perhaps a candidate did or said that kind of made them stand out from the others? Are there things that a candidate should absolutely avoid during the interview? I mean, there's some obvious ones, but now diving in a little bit to your experiences with interviewing, if you could share some tips there, that would be great.
I guess as I got the ball rolling, I jumped ahead. But so yeah, I mean, I have like real opinions about the hiring process, the norms in faculty hiring as to whether they actually work or not. To be totally honest, I think some of them are just a little ridiculous. But the reality is the reality that we're working with. So the job talk inside our school ends up being very important. I mean, and I don't know if people want to hear that or not, but I mean, especially given the diversity of backgrounds that we have, you know, if people can communicate their ideas effectively to the wide audience of people, that usually it generates a pretty solid momentum. You know, I think once you're on grounds and you've made it to that point, you know, it's the probability of getting hired, you know, goes up dramatically. But if the job talk goes really poorly, then it has a precipitative effect as compared to the individual interviews. And I think we put too much weight on them. But the truth of the matter is that ends up being kind of the keystone associated with, you know, making that a good day or not. And so I would emphasize practicing that like a lot, you know, getting in a good rhythm and having a clear message about what you're going to say in that talk. I think it ends up being pretty important. You know, I also think that we have a general sense about enthusiasm and communication skills at the original screenings. You know, if you make it to that point, then we you know, it appears to us that you have the technical experience and background to be a good candidate. So having kind of, you know, showing good interest and asking good questions makes a huge difference. And the first question you should ask is never, how many course buyouts should I get? Do I get the first year? You know, don't do that. It's a red flag. You know, to be honest, like, ask questions about, you know, faculty research and working with students and collaborate, like things that seem to originate you towards wanting to be part of the community, not being an isolated single practitioner. And so you can tell right away if people are optimizing for themselves or optimizing engagement just based off the questions that they ask right out of the gate. So I would recommend against that. Yeah.
One of the things I'll flip it around and I'll say this is what you should do. So one of the things that's been most impressive to me is when a candidate comes in, we've cleared them for the technical, right? You've already gone through the Zoom interview, that type of thing, and you're on the ground. Is when they've done the research, looking for collaborators within your faculty that you have. right? And so, hey, I'd like to talk to this faculty member because I think my research aligns and we could do some cool things together. This is how, and maybe you've talked to them earlier in the day. You know, by the time they get to me, I'm usually one of the last interviews of the day. They've had the job talk, they've had many other things. And this is like, okay, here's a collaborator, here's one in a different department, right? That would be a wonderful collaborator. And so understanding how your research kind of fits into the purpose and mission of the Data Science Initiative, the School of Data Science, and finding those collaborators is one of those things that to me is almost an immediate, aha, they're really, number one, passionate about our university and passionate about collaborating and building the portfolio very broadly. And that's one of those things that if they do that, it goes really well usually.
Just to echo that point, one of the several job talks that we had that went really well, the candidates actually talked about other people's research and how they could relate that were in the room during the job talk. And people were really impressed. You know, it's not like they went into depth about what other people were doing, but they said, you know, this type of work that, you know, X professor is doing, this is how it relates to me, and this is how we could partnership. And that really, it resonates. You know, it's really like you kind of form fit that to the position, and it makes a big difference. You know, it's not easy to do, so it comes out. Yeah.
One tip that I might add that's actually before the interview is that if you can identify a potential champion for you among the faculty in the host institution, this might be someone who shares research interests with you or who might be a potential collaborator. You can just reach out to them and say that, hey, I'm applying, and then you can just leave it at that. And this person may be in the committee, or they may bring it up to the committee's attention that you might be a good candidate. That's important. That's really helpful because, again, the committee is searching for the right candidate among hundreds of candidates. And then endorsement of a colleague who understands the research area is really valuable input for the process. So I would encourage people to do that. And then in the interview, I agree. So enthusiasm, being genuine, all of that is important. Really, we'd like to get the impression that the candidate has thought about this position seriously, has envisioned themselves being there, collaborating with people, and demonstrating that during the process. That's really important. That shows a few things about you. It shows that you are someone who takes their responsibilities seriously, getting information before making important decisions. It also shows that you are really interested in the position and are likely to accept if made an offer. It also shows that given that you have done some research about the institution, and in that process you probably discovered some aspects of that institution that are not perfect, but you are still interested, that means that if you join, you won't be shocked. So you are ready to join the ranks and contribute.
Yeah, I'll just kind of reiterate that if you know somebody inside ahead of time, whether it's before the interviews actually take place and you just have applied, tell the person you know. But the other thing is, if you are coming on campus, right, one of the, I don't know if it's a secret process or not, but we have an interview slate, whether it's a day or day and a half. We send it out to the faculty and say, here's all the interview slots, sign up, right? And so people feel they're, you know, that are interested, look at your CV and sign up for slots to talk with you, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes two-on-one, sometimes in the job talk. If you've already reached out ahead of time, they're going to make sure that they sign up. And then that feedback gets back in. And so filling your, you know, the candidates, it's a hard time to fill their interview slots, and you have to kind of push your faculty to make sure you have a full schedule. Those are the ones that are probably not going to make it through. So the ones that fill up quickly because people are interested, right? And if you can prod that ahead of time, that's even that much better.
Great advice. So I have a kind of a bigger question that I'm saving up for the end. But I just wanted to check in with the audience if there are any quick questions. If not, I do have a quick one as well. Okay. So do any of you have any experiences or tips for what might be considered non-traditional candidates? So do you have folks from industry or from government who want to switch careers, come back into academia? Have those been in your candidate pool, and do you have any suggestions for them?
One comment I'll make is that some of these non-traditional candidates are actually now becoming more mainstream. Like, as I mentioned, we have an open position in computational social science joined with linguistics and political science and economics. So those things are now emerging more and more. So these things will be, I think, easier as we proceed. But I guess the suggestion I'll have is, well, a few things. One is, even if you are maybe in a non-traditional domain as compared to others in data science, have some familiarity with the recent advances in the foundations of data science as well as tools, because that's what some of the other people in the institution will be talking about. So having a meaningful conversation with them and to show that there's potential for collaboration, and also highlighting what you can bring to such collaborations. Previously, I think somebody else mentioned someone with a philosophy degree. That's becoming increasingly important in data science, in ethics, in techniques for ethical data science. So people with those kinds of backgrounds should really study the institution well and explain how and with whom they might collaborate. I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, and I'll jump and Mujdat talked about kind of different degrees. I'm going to talk about industry experience, right? That was me, right? And so one of the things, I came from industry, I'm a non-traditional academic, wanting to get back into academia. So if that's the case, right, knowing the university, participating, volunteering at the university, if it's within your city or even outside of your city, there are advisory boards, there are other ways for you to sponsor research, for you to do things as you're in industry that will start to build that tie. And then when there's a position open, they're like, hey, would you apply to this? That's totally a different type of search than I'm opening a national search and I'm inviting, you know, new PhDs coming in, because a lot of the more, I don't know if they're senior, but you've been in work for 20 years and coming back, you're not going to have a pool of 50 people or 1,000 people. You're going to have a pool of 5. And so if you're looking for that type of industry experience coming in, your pools are much smaller, and you typically work with and invite people to apply that you've worked with in the past that have been working with your university.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I worked in, you know, industry and government for 10 years before I came back to academia as well. And my footsteps in there was adjunct faculty, you know, so I started teaching, you know, with my master's degree, and then moved in, you know, gradually more as I worked through my PhD. And that's exactly how we hire people in the school now. You know, we have 3 people, I think, that have really, you know, pretty deep industry experience, 20 years or more. And, you know, they all started out teaching like 1 class a semester. We just got to know them really well and then transitioned them into the school. So I think that's exactly right. Advisory boards, you know, affiliation, that type of thing. Because it's because the traditional hiring process is really engineered towards traditional academia. So it's almost like it's a whole nother set, unless you're looking for someone specifically to run capstones or, you know, do applied projects and things like that, then maybe you would stand up like a professional practice faculty member. But usually our pool comes from, yeah, for some affiliation. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you all. I have the big one for last, which Brian didn't get to see yet, but maybe you should go last. So the big question is, where's this field going, right? Where do you predict, what will the field look like in 5 to 10 years? And keeping in mind, of course, the theme of this career panel, what should current and prospective data science faculty do to prepare for that future, right? Is it that they should embrace open practices? Should they become fluent in and specialize in artificial intelligence? So where do you think the field is going, and how important is it for prospective candidates and faculty to kind of lean into that future? Mujdat,
Yes,
you unmuted.
I can start. So I don't think I'll have a perfect answer, but I'll just mention a few things. So, well, I expect and hope that the field will be more and more diverse in a variety of ways, of diversity of people, diversity of disciplines, and diversity of applications. And that will make data science stronger in the long run. And this is a very popular area, and it's even very popular now with, it was big data, now it was data science, now AI is the more popular term. So it's out there in the public, and the buzzwords can change. The level of broad popular interest might fluctuate over years. But at the core of it, I think the experience over the last maybe a decade or 2 decades or so shows that data science is here to stay and grow as a domain, because fundamentally there are important scientific, societal problems that this field can address to produce, essentially come up with meaningful solutions. There will be a lot of principled work required, so we need a variety of candidates in this area. Their strong background in statistics and algorithmic thinking will always be there. I don't think that will change. And keen interest, appreciation of expertise in a domain will be important. So candidates should also have interest in applications. That said, the domain is changing extremely fast. So adaptability will be important for all of us. We have all changed directions and our interests. But adaptability doesn't mean jumping onto anything that really becomes popular. Especially in a burgeoning field like that, it actually brings a responsibility on faculty and researchers to differentiate fact from fiction in some sense that's out there, and manage and address the society's expectations and concerns about data science and AI and how all of that will impact their lives. I think the big word maybe over the next 10 years or so will be trust in data science, trust in artificial intelligence. And then, as we all know, that includes many things, all the way from fairness to transparency. Really building trustworthy systems will take some time. And I think that's why we are having all of these discussions, how to best achieve their and reach there collectively. So in terms of your question about AI, yeah, I mean, at this point, data science and AI, we can get into definitions. They're, of course, not the same thing, but there's a huge overlap. So yes, definitely AI will be important for anyone who is in data science. And then open research practices will be extremely important, especially when we are in the age of these big models that are hard to essentially analytically explain. There will be a lot of interest in open science, reproducibility of research results that will continue and to be valued in the future. So the other thing I'll mention is one thing that Micaela was mentioning earlier, which was that get involved in professional organizations and communities like ADSA, as well as others in your own discipline. Be volunteer, contribute to conferences, journals, activities, all of that is important. And also, even if you are hired into a traditional department, get some kind of involvement with a data science initiative or entity at your institution. Let me stop there.
Thank you. That's excellent advice.
Yeah, that's excellent. I don't know how to top that, but I will just say I don't see the amount of data in the world going down, or where it's collected and going down in any way. So being able to solve problems, whatever the field is that you're working on, through a methodology that involves data and algorithms and statistics is going to be there. So being able to learn and adapt whatever your problem space is with the latest techniques, whether that's deep learning in some large language model or other technique that's going to come up in the next 10 years, it's all going to be the data science. And I think that's going to be important, is to be flexible and continuously learn whatever it is that's applicable to the problem that you're studying with passion.
Great.
Yeah, it's great. It's hard to go last in the question. I guess that's good ideas. But I do think like the theory of specialization, that we've seen as division of labor over time is going to continue over the next 10 years. If we can bring some economic theory into it. And I think it's going to apply to the field of data science. I think the roles are going to get more specific. We've already seen that with machine learning engineer, or these types of kind of data visualization specialists, like these types of things that are starting to become, a little bit, data ethicists, to be a little bit more specific in the field. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that continues to mature. Academically, easy for me to say. Like, I think the things that are going to continue to grow, you're going to see a massive expansion in the undergraduate population of people that are going to get data science degrees. So I think the next 10 years is going to be like it was the previous 10 years for the masters. that's just going to grow like crazy. Even in the state of Virginia, I know, having gone through this regulatory process here, that there are 5 schools waiting next year to propose Bachelors of Science in Data Science, and that there were just 5 last year. So the previous year before that, there weren't any. So that's, 10 degrees that now exist at public schools in the state of Virginia offering these bachelor's degrees. So, and then it's going to happen at the same way at the PhD level. You're going to see more and more PhDs. So usually what happens, anyway, is that evolution of a field like this, it happens in kind of this master space, and now we're seeing it grow out on the other sides. So I think we'll have more and more candidates that are coming through with increased capability for what we used to teach in the graduate school. We are now teaching by the 3rd year in the undergrad, because it's no longer a transitional degree. These are the foundations of data science skills. And so then it's like what happens in the master's degree and in the PhD seems to be a real specialization might occur. People could really focus in on areas instead of using graduate school as kind of a transition and then finding a problem. So I think what will happen, at least I hope so, is like a contemporary academic field where you'll have a stack from undergrad to master's to PhD, and how that affects, the candidates and what we're able to do. It's going to be awesome, I think. I think people are really going to come out with these skills, whereas before we were just like hacking it together. Now I think we're going to start to kind of align on what like body of knowledge is a foundational in an undergrad or all the way up. So I'm really excited about that. And I think that'll be a precipice with which then we'll see really interesting specialization occur. And it could be a catalyst for even more innovation, in the field. So I think that it could be a really exciting time. I mean, when you really think about it, we're just getting started, we don't even have like all these pieces in place. And so imagine what we can do when we do. I mean, it's going to be amazing. And so we already have really good use cases with PhD programs that are doing great things in this space. So I'm excited about that. So I think that's what's going on.
And I love that very positive note for us to end on. And hopefully there'll continue to be more and more faculty positions for the folks going through that stack. So when they come out the other end, they also have a place to pass on what they have learned. So just a quick reminder, ADSA does have a jobs board. We have a jobs and fellowship Slack channel, and we have other publications that can advertise your open faculty positions. So don't forget to reach out to us if you have open positions. We do advertise heavily in multiple venues to job seekers. Ditto for you. Come check us out. Thank you, panelists, for all of your tips and insights into the faculty hiring process in data science. I know that I learned a lot myself, and I'm sure the folks on the call and then watching the recording will as well. So with that, I thank you again and have a wonderful rest of your day.